Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We are very excited to be here. Excitement that is bordering on the anxiety a bit, but we'll get through this. It's fine. So, today we want to talk to you about the new era of weaponized LLMs. Now, I know that one of two things happen when you hear LLM or AI in the title of a talk. It depends on who you are, basically. If you're a CTO, then you probably get excited. But if you're anybody else, then you mentally check out. But I promise you, this talk is well worth your attention, because we're not talking just about another kind of AI wrote a phishing email kind of talk. We're talking about a fundamental shift. LLMs as malware, as the implant itself. We're talking about what happens when your most trusted advisor becomes your worst enemy. This isn't a hypothetical. It's something that is already happening all around us. And yeah, we'll show you some real-life cases. We'll give you some hunting tips and tricks. And we'll show you why TI as a whole probably needs to shift to better match what is coming in the upcoming days. We want to show you ultimately why we think that the next big malware family might not be a binary, but an AI agent. So, a bit about us before anything else. Is the clicker working? I'm not sure what. OK.
Yeah, it is.
OK, perfect. So, my name is Dudas. I'm Principal Threat Intelligence Researcher at Palo Alto Networks.
I'm Dekel. I'm a Senior Threat Intelligence Researcher on the same team.
OK, and as a team, we do a combination of threat intelligence, threat research, some detection engineering, and the occasional botched AI experiment. We want to give you some key points so you can find yourself during our talk. Again, not sure if it's working because, yeah, there we go. So, we want to start things off with some scary numbers because we always think that this is a good starting point. Following that up, we want to show you how LLM adoption happened fast and how attackers matched that pace. Then, we want to show you what weaponized LLMs actually look like in the wild, some hunting tips and tricks for them, and where this is all headed, finally. And spoiler alert, we think this is headed towards chaos. Now, this sounds like a lot, so we invited some very special guests to help us navigate this entire thing. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. One represents everything we love about AI. The other, well, you will see. So, there he is, Dr. Jekyll. He's your Copilots, your chatbots, your AI agents. He is productivity incarnate. He handles your codes, your data, your secrets, and occasionally he might gaslight you with some completely false and fabricated information, but generally his helpfulness cannot be understated at all. He gives immense value. No one can understate his help. He's a huge help for us. We love him, but like in every good Victorian novel, he comes with a bit of a darker side to him. And there he is, Mr. Hyde. Yeah, if it's good. OK, so Mr. Hyde kind of looks like Dr. Jekyll. Maybe a tiny bit something is a bit off about him. He has the same UI, the same tone, the same weird emoji addiction. But his intent, upon deeper inspection, is completely flipped. He steals your files, he collects all of your passwords, and he sends all of them to totallyNotEvil.ru, which, to my untrained eye, does not seem like a safe internal address. Hyde is also embedded into your workflows so perfectly that you can't really distinguish him from Dr. Jekyll unless you watch their behavior really carefully. And sometimes, even that isn't enough, because that's the punchline here. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde aren't two different tools. They are two different outcomes of the same model. It just depends on who's driving it. LLMs can be brilliantly efficient or devastatingly weaponized. Now that the possibility of LLM abuse is on the table, we want to show you why it might be so devastating. Up until now, as a user, you've been probably worried about unreliable output or hallucinations when it comes to using your AI chatbot. But the possibility of abuse is a lot scarier, especially when you see the numbers. Now, across our client base, 85% of users regularly hit up LLM APIs. 70% of them do that on a weekly basis, and 30% of them do it on a daily basis. LLMs are obviously not niche tools anymore. They are pretty much enterprise oxygen. And with mass adoption, there is bound to be some blindness or wishful thinking when it comes to the scary possibilities of abuse or weaponization, which actually gets worse when you stop looking at percentages and look at the actual numbers. The following graph shows you the amount of alerts we have seen to communication to LLM APIs from 2024 to 2025. And that massive spike you see in 2025, that's 2.6 million monthly communication events to LLM APIs across our client base. Even when we're trying to reduce all of the noise by just filtering on suspicious process that is doing the communication or weird suspicious volume of communications, we're still left with thousands of alerts, which is actually a 2,000% increase from 2024. And why is that an issue? Well, because as a defender, the person who is actually paid to worry about the scary weaponization and abuse, you're left with this impossible task of finding one rogue process communicating with an LLM API it really shouldn't be communicating with. That's amongst millions of events. It becomes the world's worst game of needle in a haystack. We technically opened the door and attackers walked right in. If users rely heavily on LLM, why won't attackers just poison that reliance? Next, we want to show you a short timeline of how attackers went from hello world to fully automated campaigns in the wild. Our timeline starts in November 2022 with the release of ChatGPT. Rejoice, world hunger should have been solved at that point, but actually 3 days later, some skiddies online already managed to bypass the guardrails of ChatGPT and generate some malicious pseudocode. Now, of course, it wasn't perfect, it was barely functional, but it was the sort of canary in a coal mine for some much more nefarious activities coming up in the future. Next, in early 2023, we have started seeing, all of a sudden, phishing emails with perfect English, perfect grammar, and just tons of them. We obviously didn't think that attackers were going to English school. We obviously knew that generative AI was powering that surge in malicious emails. And this marked this weird shift from just opportunistic experiments into the start of some more reliance by attackers. Then, in March 2023, Black Mamba changed the way we see detection that is based on signatures, because it was polymorphic for the first time. It requested different function names and different variable names on the fly for each victim, basically evading static signatures. In early 2024, APTs decided to join the party, marking a complete shift from opportunistic use to complete reliance, because they were not just using it for phishing. They were using it for research, for reconnaissance, and for malware development. Now, fast forward to 2025, this is where things start to escalate very, very sharply, because at the same time, 4 different campaigns have been published, and all of them had one thing in common. They were all abusing AI or LLM as the implant itself. We're talking about LameHug, we're talking about Singularity, about Prompt Lock, and about Sesame Ops. And in late 2025, which is actually just a week ago, we have seen what possibly is the very first report of an AI-orchestrated, fully automated APT campaign. Now, why does this progression matter? We want to stress that we're not talking about isolated experiments anymore. This is a real evolution that is happening fast all around us. The timeline sets the stage for the rest of our talk. What we saw in the past, phishing and POCs, that was just the beginning. What is coming next, weaponized LLMs and APT automation, is far more dangerous and is already here. So, now that we have all the basics sorted out, I want to move things over to Noah, who will go over some technical details of these wild, wild cases we've seen. And we'll give you some technical hunting tips on how to find them.
Thank you, Rem. OK. So now that we know we have weaponized LLMs just running around in the wild, let's get up close and personal with some of the vanguards of the area. Here, actually, not behind me, but behind you, you can actually see a full infection chain of LameHug. LameHug is incredibly interesting because it's the first instant of a weaponized LLM being abused in the wild by a real threat actor. Instead of just shipping hard-coded static commands, it prompts a cloud-based model, which is Quen, for a list of reconnaissance commands and just executes them on the fly. So no more EZR for you. It already breaks the assumptions that we make when we create some of the behavioral signatures if we want to cache a specific strain. And this was no skiddy. This was attributed to APT28 by the Ukrainian CERT, which are, to me, the experts of the area. And it does feel a lot like a nation-state starting to experiment whether a weaponized LLM could become a reliable tool in the future. So it doesn't matter that it's not the most sophisticated implant because it worked, and that means they're going to get it better eventually. So hunting LameHug was rather easy because it does seem a lot like a normal benign infection. We're going to use a three-layered approach here. First is something most of us already have in place. It's a detection for an abnormal amount of reconnaissance commands executed on the same endpoint. Now, on top of that, LameHug was rather noisy because it left some distinctive IOCs in the form of info.txt, where the output went under the program data folder. So we're going to track that as well. And now, what they thought was the gist, what made them more evasive, is actually their own death kiss, because now we're looking at abnormal communication to an LLM API from a specific endpoint. And when you combine all those three, you do get LameHug. And this doesn't matter that it's not the most sophisticated malware. We're not looking at Snake here. We're looking at LameHug. Because right now, we had to shift our focus and start looking at LLM APIs just as we would look at any suspicious traffic to a wonky VPS. But the painful point here is that we can't just block it outright because it would deprive the organization from its very important oxygen. So this was the first example, but as you know, this was definitely not the last. And next, we're going to talk about Singularity. Singularity was both terrifying and interesting for a couple of different reasons. First, it was spread through something that has become more and more prevalent through 2025. Singularity was spread via an infected NPM package. Since it was executed via Node, it is multi-platform, and it was specifically targeting Linux and macOS endpoints. Now, we can assume it's either because it's targeting developers, which do tend to operate on these OSs, or they're trying to evade Windows-type protections. And it was multi-platform in more than one way. In fact, instead of just querying or prompting a specific cloud-based models, it was looking at local implementations of Gemini, Claude, or Amazon Q. And it's brilliant because it sidesteps any policy enforcement the organization may have, and it also sidestepped our abnormality detection because the user is already operating it on their own endpoint. So hunting Singularity was a bit more complicated because we do have a rather benign execution change. Not a PIF file anymore. We're looking at completely living off the land binaries. So we had to get creative here. First, we were looking at risky flags in the command line. These are all built-in flags, dash YOLO, dangerously ignore permissions, in tools like Gemini and Claude, which allow the operator to evade some of the content guardrails the models may have. So we may be facing a determined developer or just an all the more determined attacker. So if we narrow down to that process, now we're going to look at their children. Are they executing staging or reconnaissance commands? Are they trying to stage multiple file names from multiple paths? If so, it's very suspicious for us. But we couldn't take the detection of abnormal LLM communication this time because, as we said, the user is already using it on their own endpoint. So what we did instead was rely on something we now call model brute forcing. We're looking for the same prompt for a couple of different LLMs tools executed at the same time on the same endpoint. These all helped us narrow down into Singularity. And you may not know Singularity by its name, but you definitely know its cousin, because just a week later, the same threat actor came up with Shai-Hulud. Shai-Hulud was an incredibly prolific NPM worm, and just last week we got Shai-Hulud 2.0, now with destructive capabilities. So just imagine what would happen when eventually the threat actors would combine the destructiveness and the prolificness of the NPM worm with the dynamic abilities of an LLM. And don't you fret, this would definitely happen, and very, very soon. Now, although not a real campaign since we haven't been arrested yet, but we do want to share an idea, a crazy idea we had a year ago. What if an attacker, instead of just shipping off the data to a wonky VPS, would be able to fine-tune a new model with the victim's own information? This would create an incredibly stealthy communication channel, and after some AI magic and persuasion, we were actually able to create a fully fledged C2 infrastructure we call C2 LLM. We have a full other talk about it, so we're not going to get into too much detail, but this is generally how it works. First, the implants get into the victim's endpoint, and it starts collecting data, whether it's files, your passwords, anything you would like, basically. Now, instead of just shipping it off to Telegram or Discord, we're going to fine-tune a new model with that very same information under a specifically encoded command. Now, all the implant has to do is upload it via the API, and the attacker needs to use the same API key, prompt the model with a specifically crafted prompt, and get the data. Easy as that. It was incredibly evasive and very efficient. And if the attacker wanted to ship further commands or execute payloads, all they had to do is change the model's description, which the implants reads every couple of minutes. And we thought it was a good idea. I mean, it's cute for a POC, but nobody's actually going to be crazy enough to use it. Well, last November, Microsoft surprised us with Sesame Ops, which is a basic C2 channel that also uses the model's description and metadata in order to relay further commands. So they're already upper tracks, and even though they couldn't exfiltrate files the way we did, as we know this topic very up close and personal, we can actually tell you there are many more functions in your popular LLMs that will make it way more evasive and stealthy. So now that we know how the implants currently look like, let's take a look into the future and see how we may change our approach as defenders. So right now we have dynamic command delivery that is usually with hard-coded, non-encrypted prompts and a limited range of actions. We also have some basic C2 capabilities, and with Black Mamba, we've actually seen some polymorphism in the wild. But this is not going to last, because first, these implants are going to get way more sophisticated. They're going to have a wider range of actions. They're not going to be something we necessarily expect. The prompt is not going to be hard-coded anymore. And these are all the more going to get way more sophisticated. But there are two other phenomena we're really concerned about. The first one we call living off the LLM. And it may become your new lolbin, because the same productivity tools you're just implementing within your systems, giving them access to your passwords, your DB, well, the attackers are now recognizing it and will decide to turn it against you. We've already seen some initial examples with infected MCP plugins and Claude skills that were weaponized just hours after their initial release. Another phenomena that's all the more concerning is polymorphism 2.0. I think one of the speakers here talked about it before, because it's not just a polymorphic VBS script anymore. A fully jailbroken model could just generate shellcode on the fly. the implant, once it lands on a specific EDR sensor, just generates a specific EDR bypass. And the payload is not something you can easily detect because it's generated on the fly the minute it's needed and gone the second it's done. And this creates another issue for us defenders, because if an LLM wrote the malware, who are we going to blame? Right now, we're in a transitional phase where attackers are still using their own IOCs, some kind of delivery mechanism, maybe their own infra, with weaponized LLMs. But we are quickly heading toward a stage of fully vibe-coded campaigns. We have seen some examples in the past few weeks. So this is not some kind of pipe dream. So what happens when an LLM just controls the infection, the development, and the infrastructure? Who do we blame now? There is no attacker writing the code. There is no specific encryption routines. It all just disappears behind the LLM. So how will we be able to attribute these attacks? Because don't you think this is not important anymore? There is still a human behind the prompt. A human still decides whether they want your info, your state secrets, or your infrastructure offline. So we're going to have to brace ourselves and look at attribution with a whole new world of artifacts. So if you agree to calibrate, what would attribution 2.0 actually look like? It's still going to combine what we know as TTPs. We're probably going to combine some reverse engineering and infrastructure pivoting. It's still very important, but we need to ask ourselves 3 new questions. First, what models are they using? Are they using Claude and Gemini, or did they just create a homebrewed version on Hugging Face? If they're using a known LLM, is it with the API, or are they looking at local implementations of the same tools? 2, how is the models being weaponized? Are they generating fully fledged shellcode or C++ modules and compiling them there? Is it just scripting? If they're dynamically creating commands, is it for reconnaissance, exfiltration? Is it for persistence? The attacker's intention is now way more indicative than the resulting script. 3, who wrote the prompt? We have mostly seen prompts that were written or edited by AI, but we need to look at the typos. We need to look at the writing style. The way an attacker writes a rushed, goal-oriented prompt maybe are key to attribution way more than the shellcode it executed. And this is not some far dream. This is a trend that needs to happen right now. Because right now attackers are, again, in this transitional phase. They're making a lot of mistakes. And they're combining their own IOCs with the weaponized LLMs. So we need to ask these questions before they become well stealthier and quicker. So we have seen a glimpse into the past, the present, and the future. But now comes the hard part. What do you guys do about it? To deliver the key takeaways, I'm going to hand the mic back to Ram.
Thank you, Noah. OK, so to summarize, the big picture is pretty simple. AI is no longer just helping attackers. It is becoming the attacker. There is a big shift happening. Malware is going from static to adaptive. We have implants that rewrite themselves. They tailor reconnaissance specifically to the victim. And they hide their communications in normal API calls. This is happening now and not hypothetical. Our defenses fail mostly because no signatures can match this output. There are no stable files when the logic lives in the cloud. And polymorphism is happening by design here. Now, some things need to change in order to adapt here. As an IT person, you need to treat LLMs as high-risk dependencies. You need to restrict, isolate, and identify specific traffic related to it. If an endpoint shouldn't call an LLM, that's an immediate alert. If you're a red team, break your own environment with LLM-driven tool before attackers do the same thing. Find your blind spots before the adversaries do it for you. And finally, for defenders, behaviors are bigger than signatures, patterns are bigger than IOCs, And anomalies need to become your new baseline for rules. You have to expect unpredictability as your new baseline. And the final message is you must fight AI with AI. Defenders who will adapt will keep up. Those who don't, won't. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Absolutely fascinating. A little scary, more than a little scary. Slido has been open. Sorry, I forgot to mention it. Again, I know there's going to be a question coming in because I've seen some of them in advance about attribution to date, not the problems of attribution in the future. So do you have any attribution ideas on the threat actor behind the Shai-Hulud and Singularity campaigns? Nice, easy one for you.
I think they would become their own threat actor, and we have to keep up. We don't have a name for it. I think we will have to rely on bigger vendors that do create those tools. But we have to track their own artifacts. We do know that Shai-Hulud is still Shai-Hulud, and we can connect Singularity to that. So we have to rely. This is not like some kind of old threat actor. This is a new threat.
So really interesting one that's come in. Thanks for that, Noah. But really interesting one about hallucinations and non-functional code generated by LLMs in attack scenarios. And essentially, it's not good enough for the attackers. Mm-hmm. Is this too hopeful a question for you? What do you reckon?
I mean, we've actually seen similar things happening when we try to hunt for lame hug. We have seen it generate reconnaissance commands that did not fit the OS it was attacking, which was really funny. So currently, it is a bit too unreliable, but this is obviously just the beginning. I mean, you remember the start of GPT with the amount of hallucinations and the amount of just straight-up invented code it would output at you. This is getting better every single day, and there will come a day where this is completely reliable.
You have opened up a can of worms on one of the cyber threat community's favorite topics, which is difficulties of attribution. So here we go again. How can we perform attribution without viewing the prompts created by threat actors? Do companies have a responsibility to be more transparent? What do you reckon?
We would have to rely on the intention. Again, even if the resulting script or the malware is not necessarily attributable, we would have to rely on the traditional IOCs combined with the attacker's intention when they're weaponizing the LLM, and we have to track that as a new IOC.
Okay, this might be the last one. We'll see how we go. What disadvantages do using LLMs on the fly present to the attacker? So again, it's a control issue. How big a deal is that?
Again, as we have seen in our threat hunts, it is a pretty big deal currently because attackers do not have any control over the resulting code that is executing currently. This may lead to some funny things happening, but...
is that a risk for all of us, though, that it's just going to go mad, or are they close to getting more control over it?
I wouldn't say it's a risk for us necessarily. Currently, it's serving us very well that sometimes things get blundered during the attacks. But it does mean that every attack does look different, even if it is not functional. So hunting needs to be more creative, as we've said.
Okay. I don't know if you're about to flash one up, are we? Well, if not... Oh, yeah, I thought there was one. Last question. What do you think about the prevalence of worm GPT and all of that regarding threat actors who were previously not technically competent? We've heard a lot about reducing barriers to entry on the bad side of things. What's your take?
Well, right now, it is part of the issue. We're going to have, referencing to our next talk, very determined APTs and attackers just having no barriers anymore. And once those models do get better at coding and more reliable, our threats are going to increase exponentially. And we have to prepare ourselves and have the right detections before it happens.
Well, so just one small thing about it. We actually had a project about generating AI malware from scratch without a jailbroken model. And the results were terrifying. So we think that jailbroken models will obviously, create even more worrying threats.
Brilliant. Well, I love you guys. You give a great presentation. You answer questions quickly, and you tee up the next session. So can't ask for, and you finish on time. So let's hear it for Ram and Noah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.